The NewJeans drama genuinely sucked the fun out of enjoying K-pop, and that's not an exaggeration.
The key to my destiny.
At this point, a redemption arc for NewJeans seems almost impossible. The name is radioactive. Between the endless litigation and the constant media circus, the brand is so stained that no amount of slick production or PR stunts can scrub it clean. They should have stopped with their antics a long time ago, because trying to patch this together now just looks desperate. The reality is that the public hasn't forgotten how they, alongside Min Hee-jin, tried to systematically sabotage other groups, and Hanny's attitude towards the new CEO of Adore when she was trying to do her job. All that whining and those calculated lies to protect their art were really just weapons used to drag down other successful idols. Seeing Haerin, Haein, and now Hanny crawl back to Adore after the courts slapped them with reality is just embarrassing. Even Minji is stuck in some endless negotiation loop. It's a mess. And honestly, seeing bunnies lose their minds over Danielle getting kicked out is the least surprising part of this whole saga. She blatantly violated her contract with unapproved outside activities. Like, what did people think would happen? You can't play the creative rebel and then act shocked when the company actually enforces the legal document you signed. She made her bed, and now she's facing the consequences. It's not a tragedy, it's a lesson in not being a brat. The industry has already moved on, and frankly, we're better off without the drama. Until they're able to take real accountability for what happened and the general public is actually willing to forgive, then sure, a comeback can make sense. I just don't know if their popularity will ever look the same after all this mess. But honestly, anything can happen in K-pop. Hello again, Rosieries, old and new. I'm not even gonna lie, I was completely over the NewJeans situation because it got exhausting. I was tired. What pushed me to finally make this video was seeing the reactions from non-fans and from bunnies themselves. So with that said, let's get into it.
I think what bothered a lot of people was not that NewJeans supported Min Hee-jin, even if it was illogical. Loyalty is human. Of course they were going to feel attached to the woman who built their image and career, or so they believed. What does not sit right is how that support played out publicly and who ended up taking the damage because of it. Once the conflict went public, the narrative quickly stopped being about contracts and governance and started becoming emotional and personal. Statements were made, implications were floated, certain ideas were pushed into the public without naming names directly, but everyone knew who the targets were. Suddenly, Le Sserafim and Illit were being dragged into something they had zero control over. These groups, who were just trying to survive in one of the most brutal industries on Earth, became collateral damage in an adult power struggle. What made it worse was that NewJeans were not just silent observers. Their alignment gave weight to Min Hee-jin's claims, whether intentional or not. When idols speak, fans listen. When idols imply wrongdoing, fans amplify it. And that is exactly what happened. Harassment campaigns exploded. Accusations became facts in stan spaces. Innocent idols were accused of plagiarism and favoritism simply because they existed under the same corporate umbrella. People like to say the girls had no control, but influence does not require intent. When you are that popular, your presence alone shapes narratives. The lack of clear boundaries and responsibility allowed fans to believe they were fighting some righteous battle on behalf of NewJeans. Meanwhile, other idols were getting dragged through hell for things they did not design, approve, or benefit from. This is why some people struggle with the idea of a clean bounce back, because there was never a moment where the damage to others was acknowledged, no pause to say, hey, this went too far, no recognition that other careers were hurt in the process. Everything stayed framed as NewJeans versus the world, and that framing erased the very real harm done to others. You cannot build your image on being different and then pretend the consequences of your actions do not exist. That is where the disappointment started for many people. Another reason people are tired is because of how the situation was framed publicly. There were claims made that painted Adore and Hybe as uniquely evil, abusive, or exploitative. The problem is not that companies should not be criticized. They absolutely should. The problem is that many of these claims did not hold up when contracts, timelines, and court proceedings were examined. Public sympathy was mobilized before facts were settled. That matters, because once fans emotionally invest, they stop listening to nuance. Every correction becomes corporate propaganda. Every contradiction becomes proof of conspiracy. The internet does not do well with complexity, and this situation was extremely complex. From the outside, it started to feel like certain narratives were being pushed to pressure the company into letting NewJeans out of their contracts. Again, intent is hard to prove, but impact is not. The way the story was told made it seem like staying at a door was unbearable, even though legal findings suggested otherwise. This created a situation where fans felt morally obligated to attack anyone who questioned the story. Journalists, other idols, casual listeners, anyone who did not immediately pick a side was labeled heartless or brainwashed. That kind of environment does not come from nowhere. The issue here is credibility. When you use public emotion as leverage and later the story does not fully line up, people feel manipulated, not stupid, just used. And once trust is gone, it is very hard to get back. A bounce back usually requires reflection, some acknowledgement that maybe the situation was handled poorly, that some things were said too quickly or too publicly. Without that, it feels like the expectation is for the audience to just forget, and a lot of people are simply unwilling to do that.
The NewJeans drama genuinely sucked the fun out of enjoying K-pop, and that's not an exaggeration. Once everything with Adore, Minhee-jin, and HYBE went public, K-pop stopped feeling like music and started feeling like a non-stop legal case you didn't sign up to follow. Every week there was a new statement, a new article, a new interpretation, and fans were expected to keep up like it was homework. What made it worse is that NewJeans were the center of it all. Every conversation somehow came back to them. Comebacks from other groups were immediately tied back to the situation. New debuts were accused of copying them. You couldn't praise a song, a concept, or a performance without someone dragging NewJeans into it or accusing you of supporting the wrong side. That's not normal fan discourse. That's exhaustion. Factual things happened that changed the atmosphere. There were public press conferences. There were legal filings. There were internal company conflicts being aired out in real time. This wasn't rumor mill stuff. This was all over Korean and international media. And because NewJeans were directly connected to the central figure of the conflict, their name became unavoidable. K-pop spaces turned hostile. If you said you liked Le Sserafim or Illit, you were accused of endorsing plagiarism or corporate abuse. If you said you were neutral, you were told neutrality was betrayal. Even enjoying NewJeans themselves became uncomfortable because any praise was immediately politicized. Fans didn't leave loudly, they left quietly. Streams dropped, engagement dipped, people stopped watching stages the way they used to. Not because they suddenly hated idols, but because everything felt tense. Music felt secondary. The fun part of K-pop, the reason people got into it in the first place, got buried under arguments about executives and lawsuits. What really killed the vibe was that nothing ever slowed down. There was no cooling off period, no point where the situation de-escalated. Every update reignited the same arguments, the same fan wars, the same accusations. It became mentally draining to even open social media if you followed K-pop. So when people say they're tired of the NewJeans situation, they're not saying they hate the girls, they're saying the drama attached to them changed how K-pop felt during that period. It turned something that's supposed to be entertaining into something stressful, and that kind of burnout doesn't magically disappear just because the music comes back. Once the fun is gone, it takes time for people to trust the space again.
We also have to talk about how bunnies reacted when the conversation shifted to contracts and consequences, especially when Danielle became the center of it. Once reports started circulating that pursuing outside activities without company consent could lead to legal action,
fans completely lost the plot. Instead of acknowledging that idol contracts exist and that rules apply to everyone, a loud section of the fandom immediately went into attack mode. Suddenly, the company was evil for enforcing terms that every idol signs. Lawyers were dismissed. Legal realities were ignored. Anyone who pointed out that contracts are legally binding was accused of hating Danielle or wanting to see her fail. What made this moment revealing was how quickly facts stopped mattering. Adore did not randomly target her. The company made it clear that unauthorized individual activities could lead to lawsuits. That is not oppression. That is contract law. But bunnies treated it like a personal vendetta, pushing the idea that Danielle was being punished simply for existing or expressing herself. The reaction was intense. Harassment towards staff increased. Fans threatened boycotts and protests they did not understand. They even go as far as saying things like, "What happened to Danielle is unfair," or "Danielle should have never been kicked out," or "Danielle's termination and lawsuit against her and her family member seems suspicious," or "New Jeans will always be 5. It became less about protecting Danielle and more about refusing to accept that actions have consequences in a professional industry. This is where a lot of non-fans checked out completely, because watching people deny reality in real time is exhausting. You can feel sympathy for an idol while still understanding that contracts do not disappear when emotions run high. What made it worse was, once again, the lack of any clear attempt to calm the fandom down. No message encouraging fans to stop attacking others. No acknowledgement that the legal side of things was complicated. Just silence while things spiraled. So when people say the fandom turned them off permanently, this is what they mean. Not one incident, a pattern, a refusal to accept accountability, and an insistence that New Jeans exist outside the same rules everyone else follows.
Here's where I'm at with it. This isn't about punishing New Jeans or saying they should disappear forever. It's about how weird it would feel to watch everything just reset like none of this happened and we're all just supposed to clap and move on. That doesn't feel right. Not because people are holding grudges, but because nothing was ever really addressed. There was never a moment of reflection, no pause, no acknowledgement that things got messy and people got hurt along the way. It was just noise, chaos, and then silence. And when that's the case, a comeback doesn't feel exciting, it feels awkward, like showing up to a party after causing a scene and acting like everyone else is being dramatic for remembering it. A lot of fans aren't angry anymore. They're just disconnected. The emotional attachment snapped during all the drama. Once that happens, it's hard to rebuild, especially when it feels like the expectation is blind support instead of mutual respect. Also, let's be real, popularity can't carry everything forever. There's a difference between being streamed and being supported, between noise and genuine interest. Right now, a lot of people would tune in out of curiosity, not loyalty, and that's not the same thing. So when people question whether New Jeans would ever reach the same level again, don't view it as hate, it's realism. This situation changed how people see them, fairly or not, and pretending it didn't happen won't undo that. If there's ever a real comeback that feels earned, it'll come from honesty, not hype, from growth, not pretending the past was just stan drama that blew over. Until then, some people stepping back isn't cruelty, it's just being honest about how this whole thing felt.
At the end of the day, I'm not sitting here wishing on anyone's downfall. I'm just being honest about how this whole thing felt as a fan. The New Jeans situation made Kpop exhausting for a lot of people, and pretending it didn't won't magically fix that. Maybe they'll come back stronger, maybe they won't. I genuinely don't know. What I do know is that a lot of fans checked out because the fun disappeared, and that's something people need to stop brushing off. You don't have to agree with me, and that's fine. Just keep it respectful in the comments. And please note that not agreeing with me is not the same as attacking my character and leaving nasty comments. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then go ahead and like, subscribe, and click that notification bell. Rosie Aries, I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.